now.
All right. So I'll start where I was just what I was just talking
Yeah,
about before we
perfect.
started. Is that in my role as an assistant principal, I think the most significant consequences of teacher stress are things that happen to relationships or you know, to the effectiveness of the work a teacher is doing.
Mm.
For example, when I say relationships, I think of in the moment responding to a student in a way that had you had an opportunity to think about it
Yeah, to
and not under
pause.
stress,
Right.
you would the response would have been different and maybe more positive.
And do you think those relationships are happening both teacher to student and teacher to fellow teacher, or is it
Absolutely.
okay? But probably the
Absolutely.
most significant ones for you are teacher to student, or at least that break down the learning
Yeah, break
relationship.
down the learning relationship. I definitely think is teacher to student, but I think there's a lot of you end up treating people that you trust them or don't. I mean, people that are close to you, maybe it's in your department or where you're located in the school, differently because they know what you're going through. So you maybe treat them a little differently. And as that happens over time, if it's not positive, it can wear down the relationship.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon you have a conflict between staff members that you're trying to work out, whether it is just like between us so that it can be a more productive environment or more happy workplace, or like formally through human resources.
Right.
And
well, and so like I think that's the premise of the article, essentially, that idea of wearing things down. Like I think what you're talking about, where it sort of starts not necessarily in a profound way, but might become profound over time.
Yep.
And so like the kind of the premise of the article was based around the idea that is the basic idea of what teacher burnout is, right? So teachers go to school, and through their experiences with students or with coworkers or with the system itself, they get worn down over time.
Yep.
And so then there's this perception or this word that's used, which is that teachers burn out, right?
Yeah.
Use up all their energy, it's gone. The only way to get it back is summer vacation, or to like take an extended leave, or just take sick days when you're not really sick or whatever. And that you go somewhere else to replenish, and that you come back. So then the author, I think, was asking, if we reframed it as demoralization, right? That they're not able to do what fulfills them as teachers within the context of their day at school, that they're not going to be getting filled up at school. And the end result is the same thing, but if we think of it as demoralization, then we could think of the system and what happens within their day at school as a place where not only they could expend their energy, but also a place that they could build their energy if it was set up that way, right? So like positive interactions with students can make teachers feel great. Positive, feeling like they're empowered as educators by the system or by administration can make them feel, like they want to come back.
Right.
And so instead of seeing school as just a place to spend energy, that it's also a place to use it. So do you see consequences then? Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you do as an administrator.
Absolutely. Like. And I can see with that definition of demoralization, that definitely happening. There's, you hear it all the time. We keep getting more and more and more on our plates.
Yeah.
And
it's a common.
I have less ability to just do my teaching as the art, or that it is for me. Like everyone has their own niche on how they give out the information and connect with kids, and the more guidelines you put on it,
right. The less they feel like
they're able to shine, and so there is that feeling. The flip side to that is...
Good. I'm glad you're approaching that, because that's something I struggle with.
The flip side to that is, like I can give you an example, is lack of accountability. And I've heard that, particularly in my current role, like, okay, this is what we're focusing on. Like, let's say our equity team, for example.
Yep.
Like, how are we seeing the CLEAR model in the classroom? How are we this is a focus of the district, this is a focus. Where is the accountability from you as administrators with every single one of us to be taking steps toward this?
Right.
And fellow teachers are asking that of administrators. And so then you're like, well...
Oh, like some teachers are coming to you and saying, I'm doing this.
Yes.
And
where's
my
the
peers are not
for my peers?
showing... Right.
What,
how do we as a system,
Yes.
Because they recognize they might do it in their classroom, but if for the rest of the day, those students don't see it.
And part of that, I mean, that specific example can come from lots of different places as well. I mean, you could have staff who are, who believe that what they're doing is the best way to help students of color, per se. And but not looking on the other side of that. So they're saying we need accountability, and so there needs to be, in my opinion, there needs to be some sort of guidelines or framework to work within, so that we're as a group moving toward success for all students. But there does need to be room for individuality within each classroom, and that's what makes school great, is because you might have a person who, students who are like, I have to have Mr. So-and-so for biology, whatever, or I absolutely can't have Miss So-and-so for algebra, whatever it might be, but then you have a different kid coming and saying the complete opposite of that.
Right.
And that is because everybody relates differently to different people based on their lived experiences. And so how do you keep a framework and a structure in place as an organization, but still allow for some freedom or art of the job?
To meet every student's needs. I hear that from the counselors at our school too, that idea that like teachers who are perceived as sort of not engaging with what the system is trying to do still, and who often have trouble with their students, still have some people who love them, some students who love them.
Absolutely.
And so then that student doesn't get served. But so do you think this has to start then does this need to start at the front end with like a clearer, so in my mind when I think of this, because I struggle with this too, I look at the teachers in my building and I see a lot of teachers who feel a lot of stress and would describe themselves as being burned out or demoralized or whatever. And I see teachers in largely the exact same situation having a very different experience, right? Not feeling burned out, feeling empowered. And so like that makes me wonder whether some of it is about the sense of purpose that teacher came to the school with, and whether the school needs to make sure that, you know, whatever their purpose is going to be, that their staff is on board with that purpose.
Yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of the problems that this author was talking about stem from a disconnect between a teacher who had a vision for what it would be like to be an educator and a system that has a different vision of what they need in educators. And assuming that neither group is like intentionally misleading the other, like assuming that the system isn't actually broken, like full of people who really don't care. Then the bigger problem is like, how do we match appropriately teachers with, and how do we decide like, okay, this isn't working for you, without them, I don't know, without losing good teachers who might be good in a different system or because they have a different vision for what they're doing.
And I think it goes back to relationships and trust with both team, like maybe it's your same class that you teach with another staff member or department or with administration. That you're talking along the way of, these are some things that we're seeing wrong. This is what's going really, really well. This is what is not going really, really well. Where can we find and having a relationship to be able to have those conversations for them to be productive and not disciplinary or you're in trouble, but like, hey,
which must be a hard position for you, like, right? Because you've got to set that purpose, but you also have to enforce the purpose when people are not. And like, sometimes I struggle because I feel like, and this kind of gets to that last question. The author was very teacher centered for sure, and they were talking about the idea that teachers who push back on systems that they don't think are empowering to them or that are causing stress that isn't necessary are often labeled as being self-interested rather than student-interested. And my struggle with that is that I don't think they have to be different. Like, you can look out for your self-interest, which will in turn lead to better education and is appropriate for the student interest. Right.
Sometimes they are.
But how do you decide when? And like that's, and I don't know how to decide. And that, but I'm sure you run into this problem as a teacher where you're like, okay, these two people are talking about this same problem, but managing it in a very different way. I think this person is not looking out for self-interest to be a better educator. They're looking out for self-interest simply because they've lost their desire to be a good teacher. You know, like, you can be self-interested, have a healthy, balanced life, and still be a good teacher, I think.
And absolutely.
How do you navigate that as
an administrator? That's hard. You have to be able to listen and acknowledge where your staff is at. So if a teacher came to me and said, I can't do it this way, whatever it is, whatever way we're asking, to find out why, what feeling they're having, what are some outcomes that they saw that were negative, or what are some and then for us to have the opportunity to say, this is what and why, or the research behind it, or what we're seeing, or the stats behind it, to be able to have that open conversation to say, I get that this isn't the number one way you want to do it.
Right.
When we look at the cause and effect of the whole school, this is what we're asking, and this is why. But I would be willing to be there with you as you go along, or you run into an obstacle.
And have you had success with that?
Yes.
Okay. So like that's worked where you feel like
it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. I can't
but where teachers are moving to a more comfortable place within.
But it definitely. And sometimes it's built relationships, and sometimes it's been like, you know what, it has been like, I've had staff I've worked at in this capacity only at the high school level, but another capacity at the middle school level. I've had teachers be like, you know what, I know based on these experiences that I'm better suited for middle school, or I'm better suited for elementary, or whatever level that they have moved from or want to try. And helping them find a niche where they're the most comfortable, yet acknowledging their strengths, because there's not a single teacher that doesn't have a strength that brought them here. They got to the gym teacher, you know what I'm saying?
Refers back to what you were saying earlier about like how
you acknowledging that they have, that there is a strength. Unfortunately, in this role as an administrator, there are times you have to say, you gotta be on the bus, or or you know, to come along, and that's hard. That's hard because you know their heart is in the right place. There's like all the silly memes, everything you can see out there of teachers when people went into teaching for June, July, and August. There's not a single person in any of our schools that are there for that I believe. I mean,
although June, July, and August is nice.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, I think.
But there is. Or the ones that can't sustain because they're
and acknowledging the well-intended behavior or actions, or you know, and trying to get them to a point where they can understand that whatever directives or whatever systemic thing is happening for the time. I mean, in the last 15 years, like, you know, we've had so many different directions and way things have gone that are no longer anymore, and now you're doing something different. And I think our teachers newer to the profession and teachers who have been in the profession or in the same system for a really long time really need to hear each other out.